But let me go to Solomon, because Solomon, I don't want you to self-destruct, because I know what you have is kind of hot there. So go for it.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm about to destroy three people, two people I really like, and one person I really do not care about. That is Chris Matthews, Rachel Maddow, and Elizabeth Warren. And it's just going to go down this path that I didn't see coming at all. But it's what's happening still. It's still happening right now with Loris O'Donnell in his show. But between Chris Matthews' show at 8 and Rachel Maddow's that came after, hopefully no one's really watching MSNBC. They did this as a time filler because everyone's watching the Republican train wreck debate on CNN right now. So they needed something to fill the space. And they feel Bernie is an important, so they just put him in there. But this forum that they did at his college, University of Chicago, Chris Matthews grilled him in a way that I think was important. It was obvious that he was showing his obvious bias, because when he did this with Hillary Clinton, it was so glowing. He was so glowing with Hillary Clinton, and he was so animated and angry against Bernie that it was impossible to not notice the difference. And how are you going to get this passed? He wouldn't let him finish half a sentence. And Bernie got mad in response, and you could see it in the audience, their reaction to it. It was very tense. It got very tense and animated between the two of them. But it got the idea across in a constructive way, in that Bernie kept saying, "You're thinking in a different worldview than me." He keeps talking about, how are you going to go to Mitch McConnell and convince him? He's like, Bernie was like, I do not care about Mitch McConnell. I don't care about Mitch McConnell. I don't care about these Republicans. That's the problem. And he's like, you're thinking about this only as if I work inside the Beltway. I don't plan on spending time inside the Beltway trying to make deals with these people. And this is something that he should be saying more in the stump, but I'm glad this kind of thing has pushed him into talking about what this political revolution means. He said, the bully pulpit, I'm using the people to pass this legislation, going across the country to tell the American people that Congress is bought and is not listening to what you mandated in the election. That's what my election means. That's what this campaign has always been about. If I didn't feel like this was necessary, I wouldn't have ran. I'm not someone who has had presidential ambitions ever. And I think that was very constructive and brought out by just the animus of Chris Matthews. But then what happened on Rachel Maddow in the next hour when it ended was just fascinating. Disgusting, but fascinating.
Wow.
Where she noted the importance of it and did this kind of thing where she's done this entire race where she's called the Democratic race just so interesting and fascinating and nice to look at, but never talking about it as a serious race where either one of them could win. It's always had the underpinning of, well, it's just an interesting discussion that's happening on the way to in Philadelphia when Hillary Clinton gets the nomination. It's going to be an interesting philosophical debate we're going to have here before she gets it. And it's when she talked about one thing that they also talked about in the Chris Matthews forum, which she then used as a baseball bat to everything Bernie's doing, basically trying to tear apart the entire reason he's campaigning, to try and argue that he really shouldn't be doing this anymore, and that the turnout rates have not been as high as they were in 2008. And she kept saying it, and she kept saying it in every interview with a guest, whether it was directly involved with Bernie or not, or she just kept saying it, kept saying it, kept saying it. The turnout was lower, and she's like, even Bernie was one time said, well, it's higher than it was in 2008 and 2004, and she was like, well, the Democrats didn't win then, so that I don't know if Bernie's really that electable if he's going to use those models. And it's to see that argument taking place when the reason turnout has been so low, for the media not to realize that their effects on both the Democratic and Republican side have shaped these turnout rates so much. Their obsessiveness with covering everything Trump does has almost certainly had an impact on the high turnout rates on the Republican side, and their complete disregard for even portraying the Democratic race as a race. They won't even, except for maybe the 2 weeks around Iowa and New Hampshire, they wouldn't even let voters have the confidence to feel that this was a contested election on the
Right.
Democratic side. And so was Bernie and during the fall when some networks gave him 20 seconds of coverage over the span of a few months,
Right.
in the few weeks up to Iowa when people finally got to find out who he was supposed to turn out Obama-like turnout in the Democratic primary, that was never going to happen. That you guys never allowed people to even think that as a possibility.
Right.
And to now say, well, he hasn't done it, so he's obviously not going to bring out that turnout. He's probably not even going to win against Donald Trump or whoever's the nominee is. That was so incredibly bad for her to try and push that narrative and try to push that he's giving up on South Carolina. The Black is pushing out this Univision poll, which is the obvious outlier to every other poll showing that he is almost tied with her in the Hispanic vote. It said he's 30, 40 points behind in the Hispanic vote. And this is the first Univision poll that's ever been conducted so far in the national election.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact it's voting pool, what that proved is that they need to tweak their voting pool because it's completely inaccurate to the voting aggregate of all the other polls.
Right.
So the news there should have been Univision has outlier poll, not Univision has poll of Hispanic turnout. Bernie has no chance with the Hispanic turnout or the Black turnout. He just has white people. We're back to the whole Bernie bro thing. He only has white male voter narrative, and
it's and I want you to, because you got to tell me what you're upset with Elizabeth Warren about, but it just goes to this: they are doing everything, the entire establishment, and they think they want to call us conspiracy theorists, right? Because we call it an establishment. But every tentacle of this establishment is doing their part to suppress Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders is bringing a legitimate revolution. And the problem is the revolution has already happened. That's number one. Number two is actually, I don't forget number two. Go ahead. Tell me what you're upset with Elizabeth Warren about.
Yeah, and that's where what Rachel was talking about ties into Elizabeth Warren. And the second part that Rachel was talking about was in going past South Carolina to Super Tuesday. Ignoring what 538 is talking about, is like this is essentially going to be a fight all the way to the convention, unless the media narrative changes somehow. Rachel Maddow comes in and tries to change the media narrative so that doesn't happen, and says that the states that Bernie is doing well in, and she zeroed in on Massachusetts and said this is a must-win state. If Bernie does not win big here, he should quit. And there's about 4 polls that came out, 3 of them showing Bernie winning by 5 to 7 points in Massachusetts, and 1 that has Bernie losing by 3 points in Massachusetts. Which poll do you think Rachel Maddow chose? And was discussing the fact that Bernie must win Massachusetts.
Obviously, the one where he's losing. Right, go for it.
Yep. She chose the one where he's losing. And to say that if Bernie doesn't win here is because Massachusetts is important. It is the second largest state in terms of delegate count on Super Tuesday. Texas is the only one with more. And I think Virginia is third. So if Bernie closes the gap in Texas to a reasonable margin and wins Massachusetts, he really can. That momentum is back because that she will not have a wide margin lead for pledged delegates. And as the map continues, he will very quickly close whatever that gap is.
Yeah.
But the fact that in these different polls, and that poll that showed him losing was the same. It's a WBUR poll, which does polls throughout the New England area, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and then they did polls in New Hampshire. They were the ones who were showing Bernie only having a slight lead in New Hampshire of like single digits, like 5 to 9 points, and that was completely off. They've been lowballing Bernie in a lot of state polls, but she still chose it, But the fact that it still isn't a large, I expect Massachusetts to have a wider margin than 5 to 7 points in Bernie's favor anyway, right. And that's where Elizabeth Warren comes in.
I thought that's where it was. Yeah.
I've been watching since before Iowa, where people in the subreddit were saying, Elizabeth Warren is going to endorse. She's just waiting. She's going to come in right in Iowa, and she's going to make Iowa a blowout. And then it was like, okay, but New Hampshire's right by Massachusetts. She's going to come in, and Bernie's going to win by the largest margin ever. Didn't happen. Nevada is closing. She's going to use that to be the most famous progressive in all of America, and she's going to make sure Bernie cinches Nevada, and then the momentum is going to be out of control. South Carolina, she can help him close the gap in South Carolina. It's not going to happen.
So you're disappointed in so if I let me help you out because we just got joined by Lee Fang and I want to circle to him. But you're disappointed with Warren because she hasn't come out to do the progressive.
And she's not. Where is she? Where is she, Ben? If she endorsed in Massachusetts, he would win by a landslide.
Yeah.
Where is Elizabeth Warren? Who is talking to her to make her think, even after all that has happened, that is still Hillary Clinton is inevitable? Is it the same people who told her she would have lost if she would have won? Because people are openly saying that if she had run, this would be over by now. Yes. Who's made this bubble around her to make her think that progressives cannot win in 2016?
Solomon, you just answered your own question. If they were strong enough to convince her that she couldn't win in 2016, when it is obvious right now, it is clearly obvious to anyone who's just a passive observer that this would have been over with for Hillary Clinton. This would have been Elizabeth Warren's year. If they can convince her not to run for president, they can very easily convince her not to endorse anybody. So it's really going to be the onus is on her, man. I still love her, still respect her. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been joined by Lee Fang of The Intercept. Lee, how are you? Let me make sure your mic is on.